Welcome to Justice Losers, the podcast where we talk about entertainment media, namely movies, TVs, and comics. I'm your host, Preston, joined as always by my delightful co-host,
Matt.
Matt, what should people do? I know I said talk about instead of discuss, but just
you know what?
Move on.
It feels very calm and very safe to go back to our original ones. Yeah, it's nice. People should like and subscribe and follow, and there's generally positive interactions on however you're experiencing this podcast. Mm-hmm. Do those. Leave a friendly comment or a not so friendly comment, and check out our Instagram highlights. That's going to be at Just Us Losers Pod.
It's football time in Oklahoma. That's not true. Oh my God. Today we're talking about football movies. You knew this. This is a kind of a test episode for an overall series that we want to talk about, that we are probably going to do in April, May, of sports movies. Similar to our Halloween episodes, where we talked about each archetype and why those are the ones. Like, why does society just kind of accept those as the common archetypes?
Okay.
For horror movies, I want to talk about all the sports ones and kind of try to nail down the purpose of a given sport being the center of an episode of a movie. So,
okay,
we're going to talk about football movies today, and we're going to talk about what makes them football movies, and the bigger question for each movie: did it need to be a football movie, or can it be replaced by any other sport? We are going to pretend that all of these are not based on real stories. Oh my God. Every football movie is based on a true story, so it has to be football. But we're going to pretend that it didn't happen. Could this story be told with another sport? That's the intent. Matt, what
Preston.
Movies have you watched?
This week in particular, I watched two. I've seen a few before. Right. I watched Remember the Titans, because I actually hadn't seen that one.
Good.
It was good. I liked it.
Yes.
And then I watched All the Right Moves.
Good. Another one that I haven't seen. Cool. I've seen the 4 movies I saw this week were Remember the Titans, We Are Marshall, Rudy, and Blindside.
Okay.
So those are like the ones that I knew that if I hadn't seen it, I would get crucified on the internet for.
I have also seen We Are Marshall and The Blindside before.
The intent is to decide the formula of what makes a football movie, what makes football the sport that's necessary. And I think we have a good sample size of like the best ones.
Yeah.
And they all are kind of like varying in their levels of what they need to be.
Their footballitude.
Some of them needed to be a football movie. Some of them did not need to be a football movie. So we'll talk about that. If you guys have any issues with what we say, like saying that this movie absolutely needed to be a football movie because of whatever reason, send us an email about it. Or leave it in comments on Facebook or Instagram. We'll have places that just throw it on anything.
Yeah.
Put a comment. We'll see it. And
absolutely.
We'll acknowledge it.
Yep. But if you think we threw a home run today, then let us know. We'll be proud.
So let's start on the one that we both saw this week, which is Remember the Titans.
Yeah. Classic.
I'm gonna say this right now. This had to be a football movie. The thing that brings it together is the fact that one weak link breaks the whole team. To me, football is the only sport where every single player's roles are so tightly interwoven for the function of the team. So the reason I say that, as baseball to a contrary, each player is very important, but if the first, or let's say the left outfielder doesn't do their job, it doesn't break the whole team.
Right.
But God forbid one lineman doesn't do their job, the quarterback could get injured. It's so tightly interwoven.
Yeah.
And I don't know about any other sports that do that. I think for that purpose, the overall message through kind of the climax and the healing is that whether the coach is putting these people on the same team.
Right.
You can't just be racist. It is a team. It is a brotherhood. The moment you can't just let it happen because he's a black guy.
Right.
You need to do this.
Yeah.
Because it's a team. And I think that's something that grows their relationship a lot.
Yeah. They start out and they see each other as people, but they're different races and come from different places and hate each other.
Yeah.
And then they grow to see each other as football players.
Right.
Which is where the tie-in comes. And then they pull apart and realize that they are just people and they can be friends.
Yeah.
Something you didn't mention that I think I noticed, football movies, and I think especially this one, questions about masculinity really come into play.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of like, it seems like every football movie I've ever watched, there's at least some element of, hey, look at all these terrible ways that classic masculinity can turn into toxic masculinity and cause a lot of pain for people. But then through the power of football and friendship, we can bring it together and use it for something productive and good. And it's about sort of trimming the toxicity. And I think that is something that football especially is so important because partly like you're talking about, it's such an interlinked sport where everyone has to depend on everyone else, but partly because it's such a physical sport, such a violent sport that it does kind of get at those most basic masculine instincts of like, I'm going to fight this dude and I'm going to hit him.
Yeah. So Blindside. Again, we have to just pretend like these aren't real stories. Because, boy, that movie made me want to cry like 19 times. Just the whole time I was like kind of on the verge of tears and was like...
Yeah, it's an emotional one.
So what are your thoughts on it needing to be a football, as far as you remember?
As far as I remember, you probably could have rewritten it in a way that would have made it not a football movie, but it does lean into, like you were saying, that like protectiveness theme, and that is something that's really specific, not just to football, but to being an offensive lineman.
Right.
In a football game.
Yeah,
you protect
tackle,
the quarterback.
The left tackle specifically.
Yeah, you protect the quarterback's blind side.
Yep. Given that Blindside I had watched right after watching Remember the Titans, that is the thing that caught me. And honestly, having seen those two movies back to back really gave me like my thesis on what makes a football movie.
Okay.
Because you're right. You're exactly right that it's like about protecting, like your role is so important on the team's function.
Yeah.
To protect your teammates in a way by doing your job.
Yeah.
But no other sport does that.
Right.
So I think that this movie, if you would agree, it needs to be a football movie. Do you know anything about Rudy?
Sam from Lord of the Rings wants to play football for Notre Dame. And everyone loves him because he's such a lovable guy. Except in real life, apparently he's a jerk.
Yeah. It does not need to be a football movie.
Okay.
Honestly, you could write the movie in such a way that he wants to play a sport as a player and you have no idea what it is. Like, because it really...
That's
like,
fun.
Like, it's just, it's the act of achieving a goal. It did not need to be a football movie. Because there was no toxic masculinity. There was just the drive to do something and people around him telling him that he couldn't.
And then I should probably talk about All the Right Moves. Yeah. Because that's the one I actually saw this week. So that one's from the early 80s. Tom Cruise is the lead. He's a high school cornerback for a Rust Belt team in Pennsylvania. Entire town basically works in the steel mill. And
that's another through line I'm seeing is like kind of poor upbringing. Like Rudy, they all played steel, walked in the store, on the mill.
I'll get to it.
Okay.
Kind of the theme of this one is everyone wants to get out because it's this poor community.
Oh yeah.
And it's clearly failing. Like at one point, a bunch of the steel mill cuts a bunch of jobs and it affects some people. And so the coach at the start of the movie is like interviewing for assistant coaching jobs at some small colleges. And all these high school players are like, okay, we got to play up. It's the big game. We got to play really good for the recruiters because we want to get scholarships to good schools and get out of here.
Yeah.
Only the first half or so is really a football movie.
Okay.
It's kind of, the structure's weird, but it's like, it's a very football movie. And then there's some stuff that happens that puts Tom Cruise and the coach severely at odds to the point where he's cut from the team, despite being one of the best players. And then it's kind of about him sort of trying to take accountability for his own actions and make himself a better person. And then it just all kind of ends. I think it really, that was the first one I watched and I was like, boy, this is really about masculinity. It's about like these guys and there's the confidence aggression bleeding into toxic masculinity. There's a point where Tom Cruise is like taking it too far with the girl and in the first half, and then she's like, no, stop it. And they get angry and they get in a fight. But it is a lot of like these guys, and then they have to, take accountability for their own actions and stuff. And they're having to come to terms with their struggles and their own mistakes and their problems and trying to own up to them and do the right thing and learn from them. And it's almost a really good movie.
Yeah.
It's just kind of fine. I think it definitely had to be a football movie. And I think the reason is, like you're talking about, a lot of football movies, it's the people from the poor community, and football is sort of an outlet or a way out. And I think that's because in real life, football is often an outlet for kids in really bad situations, and they get opportunities from that.
Yeah. And one of the big things is like scholarships. So scholarships is one that you hear about all the time. That, so like Rudy, he talks about being a walk-on all the time. So it's like an opportunity for them to leave. But yeah, there's like, so Rudy is a mill.
Mm-hmm.
We Are Marshall had people that worked in the mill. And I think that's a really important point for the sports movies. Yeah. Because something tells me if we come across other sports that are college, that's going to also be a theme throughout that, is that it's people who are poor and don't have the access to the education, which is a whole issue on its own. And it is the political issue I'm most passionate about. And so it's like their way, like they can get scholarships for playing the sport better, but not being smart. So they can get access to better education through their means to be able to play sports. Yeah.
And I think football is really the pinnacle of that, partly because it's the focus of these communities sometimes. Like you look at All the Right Moves really does this. It shows both the good and the bad side of this. It's like these kids are like the only thing the town has to root for. Yeah. But if something goes wrong, they are like just hated, and they're like the coach's house gets vandalized at one point. Just a lot of ugliness, and because it's like the center of the community. Football is, I think, more of a community sport.
When it comes to movies like We Are Marshall, like when it's about a team, the team is the main character rather than Rudy or Michael. Or thank you. It is about also the community, and it was in We Are Marshall and in Remember the Titans.
Yep.
There was a lot of aspect of the community's view of it.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that has anything to do with just the sport's natural team and brotherhood thing, where they care, like, so much about all of the team. Yeah. Rather than you're like, oh, who's on base? That person's on base. Like right. With baseball, where it's a bit more like individualistic.
It really is.
Football is the team. It's also easier to know a football team than a baseball team, because like you guys talk about like whenever you talk with my dad about baseball, and you're like mentioning all players, I'm like just way over my head. But then you can talk about sports like, oh, the Ravens, their offense is really good this year. Like kind of group.
It's a unit. Yeah.
So it's about the team. It needs to be about the team. And I think the toxic masculinity, the channeling your rage, and how just rage and anger.
The conflicts between healthy and unhealthy masculinity is something that is often incidental to football movies, but not inherent necessarily.
Right, yeah. And maybe we'll find out in other sports that these may have a part to play. Yeah. But the reliance on the team, the reliance on your teammates for safety. Almost.
Yeah. And beyond that, the football as a community focus.
As a community, yeah.
The football team is a community focus.
Yes, and I think that plays into that. Like,
it's all team. Part of something there.
Yeah, like grouping. It's so important that it's
togetherness.
Togetherness. Football movies are about togetherness.
It's just all one big huddle.
It's all one big old huddle. Football movies need to be all about one big old huddle.
Yep.
That's what it means.
There it is.
That's what it is. One big huddle with some angry guys.
Yeah.
Hey guys, Preston here. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. If you liked what you saw here, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you know when we upload these every Thursday. If you want to hear more, we have an unabridged version on Spotify, SoundCloud, iTunes, and any other podcast app. Check us out on Instagram at JusticeLosersPod. See you next week.